I'm out in the Napa Valley hillsides just like a goat. So today's show is all about goats and their cheese. Not only that, we're going to take the lowly breadcrumb and show you how to turn it into some amazing dishes. To start with, a little vitello scallopini with a salsa rosa, a veal scallopini dipped in a little egg and breadcrumb, pan-fried crispy brown, served with it a really piquant salsa rosa, an old family favorite. On top of that, a little goat cheese and some of those same breadcrumbs made crispy on a little jet cold gray salt salted panino of pomodoro of tomato steaks. It's going to be an incredible dish. And of course, we're going to go visit my buddies the goats. So stay tuned.
Michael Chiarello Napa is funded by
Sunkissed, fresh citrus taste, cooking with Sunkissed throughout the day. Sunkissed, our promise, your inspiration.
by Sultan. Innovative products for a healthy today and tomorrow. Bringing you the Juice Man juice extractors designed from the Sultan family, providing products to help people make choices for healthier living. By All-Clad Metal Crafters. All-Clad is bonded construction. All-Clad is functional design. All-Clad is professional equipment. All-Clad is a state of mind. And by Wolf, makers of ovens, cooktops, and ranges to fuel a passion for cooking.
Now, to most Americans, we think of condiments like ketchup and mustard and mayonnaise and things like that. But as grown up as a young Italian kid, we had things like salsa rosa as our condiment. That's what went on the center of our table every time we've had a little pastina and brodo in different dishes like I'm going to show you today. But the salsa rosa, as you can see, I'm almost out, so it's time to make another batch. Now, the rosa in the salsa rosa is red. That red is red pepper. And this is really what we're going to celebrate today. But before we get going with this, I'm going to roast a couple of chilies, because in southern Italy, where my family's from, it's a little hot and we eat spicy at the same time. So we're going to take a few Serrano chilies, a little extra virgin olive oil in a small saute pan, and we're going to roast these until they blister and cook wonderfully. So those are just going to roast for about 5 or 6 minutes until they get nice and soft. And while those are roasting, I'm going to show you how to roast a sweet bell pepper. It's really one of the simplest things of all. To roast a sweet bell pepper is really quite easy. Take some beautifully firm bell peppers, green, red, yellow, purple, black, a little bit of extra virgin olive oil. Just on the outside of the skin, the oil will get hot and will help them blister. Brush the oil around to distribute evenly. They go right onto a cookie sheet that's been lined with foil to ease cleanup a little bit. And the pepper's going to go right into a 450-degree oven until they get blistered and wonderfully tender. Another method you might want to try, one of my mother's favorites, is to go right on the burner and just continue to rotate the pepper until they get good and charred. And continue to turn them until they're caramelized just like that on all 4 sides. Pull them out of the oven about 30 minutes later, and they are just perfect. Now from here, the meat's still a little bit firm, so what we're going to do is take this bowl, put the peppers right in the glass bowl, and cover it with the saran wrap, and that wrap's going to trap the steam inside and continue to cook the pepper. These just need a few minutes to steam, and when they're done, they look just like this. And all you have to do is hold them by the stem, get the seeds out, save as much juice as possible, and give them a quick peel. You can see these chilies, when they begin to roast and they curl up the skin like that, that's just perfect. We're gonna take these out to cool. We wanna save that olive oil. We're actually gonna add just a little bit more olive oil to that. We have some sliced garlic. Sliced garlic goes in that same pan. I'm gonna cook this until it gets light brown. I like my garlic to be a light brown. I don't like that raw flavor. I like the little tostado of the audio here. When those are getting light brown, we're gonna grab us a little bit of oregano. Any herbs that you have, any herbs that you like. I keep saying that. I really don't care. You can see the garlic's getting light brown. When that happens, the oregano, this is gonna get pureed, so I don't need to make it fine or anything perfect. Stand back, it'll pop for a second. I like the oregano to come kind of sofrito in there with the garlic and release its flavor in the oil. That's building that first layer of flavor to this really simple sauce. Into that, a little pomodoro, a little tomato. Hold the pan aside. Tomato puree goes in to a nice hot pan. And that's gonna simmer for just a couple of minutes. We're gonna add a little bit of salt. A good twist of black pepper. These tomatoes don't have to cook for that long, just a couple of minutes, and the time it takes to peel these serranos and get them in, we'll be good to go. Now all you do is pull the stem off these. Now if your skin's a little sensitive to chilies, you can buy some rubber gloves for things like this. They're probably good to have around the house anyway. I just peel them like that. And I use the seeds and all. People always take the seeds out. I like the spice. And these are gonna go right in to the tomato sauce. Those tossed together. And right over into the blender. And take those tongs you were born with. Roasted peppers go in. Now, save the roasted pepper juice. The juice is the flavor of the pepper. Use that like you would stock in a soup. These are going to blend up first and puree quite nicely. We're going to take this, we're going to add just a touch of vinegar. I love the sharpness that the vinegar plays in here. If you like balsamic vinegar, use balsamic. Use any vinegar. You could use lemon juice. Again, I don't care. Just a little bit of an acid in there to freshen this up, because the dish we're going to serve with likes that tartness. And that's it. Now this sauce as is, you can refrigerate. Because it has the vinegar in there, it's going to be tart enough to protect it for a week or so. You can freeze it, but we used to can it. And having things like this canned is just a great go-to. You'd always have one, as you could, if you remember, I always had my jar sitting around, and I always would just put a spoon into some soup or use it as a condiment, as a pasta sauce. Just cook a little spaghettini with this and toss it right now. Unbelievable. Now that the salsa rosa is done, I'm going to show you how to make a veal Milanese. What I love about the Milanese style of making veal is it has a texture to it. And we always talk about texture being a flavor, that you use it to your benefit when it's warm outside. I like something that's room temperature. This dish would not be served hot normally. You'd fry them ahead of time, and whenever everybody decided to come in from the farm and finish work, and you'd sit down and eat something kind of al fresco. So this veal Milanese takes a little piece of veal, right, just like this, really thin. Now you go to the butcher shop and you say to the butcher, hey, Mr. Butcherman, can you do me a favor? Can you give me 3 pieces of veal leg and pound it out to about 8 inches around till I can see my fingers going through it? And if he says no, you know what? You're shopping in the wrong shop. Change butcher shops. Get him to go to work for you. You're paying a premium for this stuff. So the veal's pounded out really nicely. You take a couple eggs. Take a fork and mix the eggs up. You see the yolks? You see how yellow those yolks are? That's a great egg. Now we're going to go right to the breadcrumbs. See these breadcrumbs, how fine they are? This is what a dried bread breadcrumb looks like. If you were deciding you wanted to make this dish and you say, oh, we got to go to the store and get some fresh breadcrumbs, they'd never look like this, and it would totally change the dish, okay? Now we have almost equal parts breadcrumbs to veal. You have kind of like 3 ounces of veal, 3 ounces of breadcrumbs on each cutlet. We're going to flavor them up with a little bit of Reggiano. This cheese gets crispy in there. It's like the best part of a cheese sandwich when it all cooks together. A little prezzemolo, some Italian parsley, never ever that curly stuff. Some salt. I like to season things like this because the seasoning goes right into the meat at the same time. So we're going to take our meat and we're going to season it a little bit. A couple twists of black pepper. Push the seasoning into the meat so it doesn't come off into the flour or the egg. Okay, so the veal's going to go right into the all-purpose flour, regular all-purpose flour, just a little bit. Pound it off. This gives the egg something to hold on to. So that goes in the egg for a second. This goes in the flour. Turn him over. Okay, when you pull these out, you want them to drain really well. You don't want that much breadcrumb on. All right, so let the egg drain. That goes inside. Breadcrumb goes on top. Now you can do these hours ahead. You can actually do these in the morning and cook them in the evening. The longer the breadcrumbs sit on them, the more it becomes an integral part of the meat. But you can do them a la minute like we're doing right here. All right, those sit really nicely. You have a hot saute pan. Now, I talk about sauteing a lot. This is actually a little bit more of a shallow fry. I saute in extra virgin olive oil. I fry in pure olive oil. Pure olive oil is a little bit lighter. You can see the color. It has a higher smoking point because it's a different process of making it. And we're going to shallow fry. So we're going to put, about a third of an inch of pure olive oil into this pan. Now don't think that the quantity of olive oil that I'm putting in has anything to do with how much oil is actually going to go inside the veal. That's not the case. If you're shallow frying the correct temperature, these will actually take less oil than if you had the wrong temperature. So that's nice and hot. We're going to cook these one at a time. Again, hold them away from you, so if they splatter that way. We're going to give them about 30 seconds on this side, turn them over once, and they're going to go right onto this landing pad to catch any excess oil right on here. All right, take a look there. Perfect color. That guy turns over once. He takes about 10 seconds on this side, and that's all it'll need. Perfect. Now we're just going to add this one other cutlet, give it a few seconds, and we'll be good to go. Look at that. Okay, so these guys come right over onto a platter for two. They can be done ahead of time. Like I said, you can eat these room temperature. I love things like this. I think we get too caught up with everything needing to be hot. I used to always freak me out in the restaurant. People always send their food back like they'd rather have it hot and misprepared than perfect temperature and flavorful. Okay, so we're gonna take a little arugula right here in the middle. I love these things like this where it's big old salad in the middle, little piece of veal. Salsa Rosa goes right on top. A little extra to pass on the side. Now, in typical Milanese fashion, we're going to take a little bit of lemon. Give that a squeeze right on top. That's going to go in with that olive oil flavor and that crispness and set the whole thing on fire. A little Parmigiano right on top of that. And you have one of my favorite dishes of all time. And the best thing about this is that I can't eat that much veal, but I cook that much because it makes one of the best panini of all time. So tomorrow when I go to work, I have a Vitello Milanese panino, and it is just incredible. I'm the envy of the entire office. Today you can find great goat cheese in almost any supermarket. But 20 years ago, there weren't really a lot of choices. Now Laura Chanel, she's a pioneer for artisanal cheese making. Not only is she a great friend, but she set the brush fire that turned America wild on artisan cheese.
Well, I first became interested in goats back in the early 70s, and they were part of an all-encompassing idea of being self-sufficient on the land, producing my own food. And they were just a small part of the whole, but as it turned out, they became the whole over time. They just captured my heart. It started with wanting to make cheese from their milk. I was introduced to French goat cheese. I really loved that and decided that's what I needed to make, so that became my holy grail. I went to France. I was there for about 3.5 months. I lived with 4 different families who had farmsteads all over the different parts of France. I was labor in exchange for learning. And then I came home and I knew that that's what I wanted to do the rest of my life, and started making cheese out of the milk from my goats and my friends' goats, and brought it to, most notably, to Alice Waters in Berkeley. And she tasted it and loved it and immediately ordered some for the next week, so that's what launched me. And 23 years later, she's still buying it every week. Every goat here has a name. Every goat then wears a collar all her life with her name on it. They like to eat their plastic, they chew on each other's plastic name tags, so eventually if they're here long enough, you can no longer read their names, but by then we know them all. So I think it just kind of worked out because, yes, I followed what spoke to me back with the cheese making, and then that kind of has a life of its own. It developed its own life after I put all those years and that effort into it. And so that's allowed me to follow this particular bliss, just to be with the goats.
Every week you sit on the couch and you listen to me talk about the integrity of your raw ingredients. Well, think back to 1982. The ingredients I'm trying to get you to use today are available in every grocery store you go to. But in '82, they didn't exist. We didn't have the breads that we have, the olive oil. Napa Valley was just coming into its own with its own wine, and cheese, for sure, was in the dark ages. And all of a sudden, Laura Chanel comes onto the scene, doing them for Wolfgang Puck and Alice Waters, and making these cheeses. I remember she came to my restaurant in Miami and took some fresh goat cheese like this, put it onto my finger, no bread, no olive oil, nothing, and just set it in my mouth. And didn't have to sell her cheese at all. The cheese sold itself. The recipe I'm going to show you today is going to take 2 of California's summer stars, fresh goat cheese and vine-ripened tomatoes. All I need to get started is just a few breadcrumbs. Now, this bread's perfectly dried. When we say dried bread, what we really mean is stale bread. And it doesn't have to be one particular kind of bread at all. You can see I have a little integrale, I have a little whole wheat, I have some sourdough. Doesn't matter at all. We're gonna mix these in some small batches in our food processor. The small batch allows the blades to really get on the bread and make it really feeny, as fine as we can get them. We want these breadcrumbs to be very fine. The finer they are, the better flavor they're going to be sitting on our final product. That should be just about perfect. What we're going to do is we're going to sieve these breadcrumbs a little bit. Hold the blade right on the bottom with your pinky so it doesn't dump out. We're going to pass them through a sieve and just get the finest breadcrumbs we can. We can let these bigger pieces dry a little bit more and give them a grind another day. Just take a spoon, kind of pass these through. See that? These breadcrumbs are just perfect. And you want them to be this final texture right here. Can you see that? They're just great. All you want to do is play in them all day. So that is a perfectly dried stale breadcrumb. To make this dish, it's really simple. All you have to do is season a couple handfuls of breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs, a little black pepper, some salt. And we're going to put just a little bit of water in here. It's going to moisturize the breadcrumbs, and that's going to get them to stick to the cheese when we finally put them on. Okay, so keeping your fingers dry, grab the cheese, just dip the face of it onto the egg, right into the breadcrumbs. Give it a good push. You see that? Turn it over in your hand and do the same thing again on the other side. Now these could be done ahead up until this point and kept in the refrigerator until your guests come. You can just pull them out of the fridge and go right into the saute pan from there. Okay, these are good to go. We go over to our non-stick pan. We don't want too much oil on here. Remember I talked about the delicate flavor of our goat cheese. So use a non-stick pan, tablespoon of oil, get it good and hot. Again, cool on the inside, crispy and warm on the outside. That's going to be the goal here. These guys are sauteing. I'm going to get ready for the rest of this dish. Now, it's tomato season. It's the middle of summer. You take the very best tomatoes you can. Remember, a great tomato, you can actually taste the smell. So when you smell in, and you can smell like you've been walking through the green vines, they're just about perfectly. Now these tomatoes are a little bit smaller, so I'm going to leave them, cut just one big steak out of each tomato, and give myself a little drama here. A little bit of gray salt. Always season your tomatoes. You know, I have sandwiches and salads, they put tomatoes on them, they don't season them, they make me crazy. They don't taste like anything. Okay, black pepper. Now here's where I'm gonna use a little bit of unfiltered olive oil. Unfiltered olive oil is the stuff that's cloudy in the bottle, and you say to yourself, what should I do with this unfiltered olive oil? It's not an ingredient, it's a condiment. The difference being a condiment you add once you get to the table or right before you sit down. A really nice, very flavorful unfiltered olive oil. Goes on there. We come over to these guys, carefully turn them over. See that? Just perfect, crispy and cool. I'm going to turn these guys over really quick. All right. Now what we're going to do is take a couple of these lozenges right on top of the tomato. All right, now what we have is a little herb salad. We just go to the garden, we have parsley, wild mustard, basil, chives, whatever you have around, it really doesn't matter. But a nice little herb salad on this is just fantastic. Pile those guys up in the middle. Just a little bit of red wine vinegar just on top of that cheese, and a little bit on the greens. I don't need any olive oil on the greens because I have enough richness in the cheese. It's going to play all the way through. But growing up, always seeing my mom saving the bread, making sure that it was stale, grinding it. That was part of the process of me growing up. Tie that in with a 20-year-old friendship with Laura Chanel, one of the premier goat cheese producers of all the world. We get a couple of amazing dishes. A handful of breadcrumbs, a little piece of veal, turns into a Veal Milanese with a Salsa Rosa. And of course, this little bistecca di pomodorini with some formaggio di capra, tomato steak with some goat cheese are fantastic. We always talk about having a relationship with your food. This Salsa Rosa was something that I grew up on, and this goat cheese is something that took my career from here to here. When I can taste those two things in a dish, it's a success every time. I remember on my first trip to the Loire Valley in France, I was sitting in a small cafe outside with the spring sunshine beating down on me, and I asked the waiter, can you bring me whatever you like to eat for lunch? I said, okay. So he brought me over a plate of fresh goat cheese and a glass of white wine. And I took a bite of the goat cheese and I rolled it around my mouth and never tasted anything like that. I took a sip of the wine. And it was fresh and grassy, just like the grasses that I can smell right in front of me. And I asked the waiter, where did the goat cheese come from? And he points over to the goats over in the field aside and he says, from right there. I says, in the wine, I've never tasted anything that would go so perfectly with this. Where'd the wine come from? And he pointed to the vineyard next to the goats and the field next to the goats. And that is what food and wine pairing is all about. When you take really regional foods, fresh goat cheese like that and Sauvignon Blanc, or a food and wine pairing made in heaven.
Michael Chiarello Napa is funded by Sultan. Innovative products for a healthy today and tomorrow. Bringing you the family of George Foreman's lean, mean, fat-reducing grilling machine. Sultan, the secret to indoor grilling.
By Sunkist, fresh citrus taste, cooking with Sunkist throughout the day. Sunkist, our promise, your inspiration.
And by Wolf, makers of ovens, cooktops, and ranges to fuel a passion for cooking. And by All-Clad Metal Crafters,